They told me the fire at Ashford Orphanage was an accident. That was 47 years ago. A cold February night when 32 children and 2 caretakers died in a blaze that burned through the main hall in less than 15 minutes. I was sent there last month. Not as a firefighter, not as a historian, but as a journalist. What I found beneath the ruins was not just a story, it was a warning. Ashford sits on the edge of Millbury, Maine, a town so small it barely appears on the map. The orphanage grounds are fenced off with rusted chain links and faded warning signs. The fire report says the cause was faulty wiring, but that line has been repeated so many times it feels rehearsed. I arrived just before sunset. My assignment was to write a short feature for a local magazine about forgotten fires, just another nostalgia piece. But when I parked beside the old gate, I noticed something the town archives never mentioned. The main building, or what was left of it, was only half burned. The rest had collapsed inward, like it had been pulled down rather than consumed by fire. Inside the fence, the ground was black with ash even after all these years. Scorched bricks poked out from the soil like tombstones. There was a signboard half buried in weeds that read, Ashford Orphanage, EST, 1923. The last 2 letters were melted off. That's when I met Elliot. He was about 60, wiry, and carried a paper coffee cup that steamed in the cold. He told me he used to work here, maintenance staff, back in the 70s. When I asked what he remembered about the fire, his eyes twitched, like he'd heard the question too many times. Wasn't the fire that killed him, he said quietly. It's what they saw before it started. I thought he was just another local drunk telling ghost stories, but he pointed toward the wreckage and said, if you go down there, don't touch the basement doors. They were sealed for a reason. 2 hours later, I was inside. I'd convinced the town clerk to give me a temporary clearance letter. My flashlight cut through clouds of dust as I moved past collapsed beams and cracked tiles. Every step echoed like a whisper. The air grew colder the deeper I went. I found what looked like the remains of dorm rooms. Tiny metal beds lined up in perfect rows, melted together by heat. Then, behind a half-collapsed wall, I found the basement door. It was made of thick iron, the kind used in bomb shelters. The top was blackened, but the handle was clean, almost polished, like someone had touched it recently. I crouched down and saw deep scratches along the bottom, gouged into the concrete. They looked like fingernail marks. When I pulled the door open, the hinges screamed. The air that came out was colder than outside. And it smelled different, not like decay or fire, but something metallic, almost like old blood. There was a stairwell leading down, barely wide enough for one person. My flashlight flickered halfway through the descent. The steps ended in a long, narrow corridor. Both walls were lined with children's drawings, done in charcoal maybe, crude stick-figure sketches of kids standing beside tall, shadowy shapes. Every single picture had that same shape beside them. And then, about 20 feet in, I saw doors. Small wooden doors, maybe 4 feet high, built into the brick walls on both sides. There were names written above them in faded red paint. Lucy, Thomas, Jonah, Evelyn, 32 in total. When I called out, just to hear my voice echo, something answered. It wasn't a sound at first. More like air moving wrong, a low vibration that made my chest tighten. My flashlight beam caught something wet on the floor, a footprint, small, bare, and fresh. The corridor behind me was empty. I followed the prints deeper until they stopped in front of a door with no name. Instead, it had a single word carved into the wood. Stay. That's when my recorder started glitching, static, then faint whispers. At first I thought it was interference, but when I played it back later, I realized the whispers were voices, children's voices. Don't let him out. He said he'd take us home. Please stay. I felt something brush my ankle. Light, like fingers. I spun around, but there was only my shadow. Then a noise, a low groan of wood behind me. The stay door was opening, Inside was a small chamber, lined with bricks blackened by smoke. There were toys melted to the floor, a rocking horse, and what looked like an old furnace built into the wall. Someone, or something, had carved a circle around it with symbols I didn't recognize. I stepped closer and saw a stack of burned photographs scattered on the ground. One of them showed the orphanage's caretakers, Sister Agnes and Mr. Darrow, smiling with the children. But their eyes had been scratched out with something sharp. My flashlight dimmed again. The air started to thicken, hot and suffocating, like the fire had come back all at once. I heard footsteps, dozens, running in every direction. Small feet, pattering against stone, and through the static, the whispers became screams. He's still here. He's still hungry. The furnace door burst open. For a split second, I saw hands inside it, blackened, claw-like, reaching out. The next thing I remember, I was outside on the grass coughing up smoke. The basement was sealed again behind me. My recorder was melted. My camera, gone. But the scratches on my arm weren't from rubble. They were small. Too small. Like a child's hand had tried to pull me back. A week later, the town cordoned off the site again. Elliot refused to talk to me after that night. He said the firemen used to hear cries even after the ruins cooled. Said the basement was never part of the original blueprints. When I submitted my story, the magazine rejected it. They said it was too fictional. But every night since, I've heard the same thing when I close my eyes. The faint sound of a furnace door creaking open and children whispering one word over and over. Stay.